Welcome back. Now, National Police Commissioner Fannie Masemola says officers won't rest until 3 missing constables are found. They disappeared last week while traveling from Bloemfontein to Limpopo, with their last known location being the Grasmere toll plaza in Gauteng. Their car tracking device and cell phones have been turned off. A 350,000 rand reward is also being offered. To unpack this further, we are joined by Popcru spokesperson Richard Mamabolo. A very good afternoon to you, Richard. A very concerning story indeed. And as Popcru, you have, of course, expressed your concern around this story. But how does this also highlight the dangers and risks that police officers face on and off duty?
Good afternoon to you and the viewers. Yes, indeed, we are quite concerned about the recent development. This has, of course, been something which is worrying for us. And, of course, it's something that definitely needs to be dealt with in the manner in which it deserves. We are quite thankful that, at least for now, the management of the SAPS have also will devise a test team which will look into the matter. And, of course, the fact that there is a reward which will be awarded to those who can come up with information will actually hopefully give people the necessary strength to come forward and give information. But however, I think as a union, we're also worried about the fact that, there's a general spike in kidnappings in the country. In fact, South Africa is #1 on the African continent. And therefore, we definitely need to have certain measures that will ensure that this is prevented. One of the areas which we want to look into is to ensure that we can no longer have families of those who might have disappeared waiting for 8 hours before reporting these incidents. I think as and when people travel across the country, they should obviously be, if it's not in line with the patterns of travel, people should be free to obviously call for concern or help as soon as they practically can, and that we believe will obviously take down the number of kidnappings that are taking place.
And speaking of that, one of those solutions that you've just proposed now in terms of not waiting for that 48-hour period when someone goes missing, what other measures as Popcru are you also putting to the table to try and mitigate such incidents from happening?
Well, I think some of this, of course, will have to do with limiting liberties of people. I understand that, for example, with the number of kidnappings that have been happening, it's quite important that at least a family member or somebody always has a clear idea of where a relative is, as and when they travel, even through this new forms of traveling devices. It's important that at least a family member is located at every turn. That will obviously have then give sufficient information to know where people's last whereabouts were. And in the case of such incidents happening, it would become easier for those who need to respond to actually identify the last place where the person was identified. So that should apply in general. But as it relates to this case, I think one of the things that we definitely should appreciate is the fact that the SAPS has come out strongly to say that there will be devising teams. We will not necessarily want to go into the kinds of investigations that they are conducting because they might jeopardize the investigations. But so far, we think that they are in the right path. And of course, we would want to urge communities more especially to come up with information. As little information as there could be, we believe that it would assist to ensure that perhaps it would lead to the SAPS to actually devising where these constables might be found, and that would definitely be appreciated.
Yeah, and just taking a look at this tragic situation, how would you say it's affected some of your members? How is the morale around police officers right now?
Look, police have been killed on a regular basis. Police stations have been attacked. It's not the first incident where police are attacked. And of course, this is one such case. And that, of course, has obviously dealt with the morale. We have been saying that we need to obviously engage around police killings and look into ways in which we could keep them. But unfortunately, this continues to be perpetuated. Whether it's officers who are on or off duty, the fact of the matter is that even those who are off duty are sometimes killed for the work that they do within policing. So those are certain measures that we've been engaged with the minister about, and we have made proposals that it becomes declared as treasonous to kill a police officer. So we're looking at legislative amendments being made, and of course looking into also revising the Criminal Procedure Act so that it defends police more, because that is one legislation, or rather one act that was enacted in the 1970s, and we don't believe that it's currently in line with the democratic dispensation. So those are the discussions we're definitely taking up with the ministers. And of course, as it relates to this spike of kidnappings across the country generally, we of course have been speaking about how we can empower crime intelligence to actually be at the forefront as opposed to being reactive, but become proactive in dealing with some of these cases.
And in those talks about talks of changing legislation as well and improving it, how are those efforts being received?
They're being received quite well. We've had engagements with the commissioner, the minister. Of course, the minister is the one who deals with the legislative matters in the SAPS. And of course, those are proposals that are being pushed to Parliament where legislators can actually make those changes. So we're quite happy with the response we've been getting from the SAPS. But as you would know, some of these things perhaps take time from the time they are conceptualized and the time they are inceptualized. So we're hopeful that it's something that can be fast-tracked.
Now, given the fact that, police are usually outnumbered by criminals as well, also outgunned by criminals, we do have a shortage of men and women with boots on the ground. When we do have a spike as well, an increase in police killings as well, what does that do for the safety of our country?
Well, it's quite unfortunate, but I think in the last year or so, we've been seeing efforts to ensure that they capacitate the crime intelligence units and ensure that we also get at least 10,000 more new officers into the employ of the SAPS on an annual basis. Though that is happening, but of course we do still have challenges wherein you've got resignations due to natural attrition and various other reasons, which of course limits those numbers. But it also has to do a lot with the budget cuts. As and when the president made commitments about having violent crimes in the country, we cannot then therefore have a minister of finance who cuts down on the budget cuts of the SAPS. Austerity measures have been part of the problem, of course, and we are hopeful that in the coming future, we will obviously have a conducive budget that can ensure that we not only recruit more officers, but ensure that they are well trained, and of course, they've got more resources in ensuring that there's an even allocation of resources across our different police stations, because as things stand, those within township and rural areas are disadvantaged as compared to those within affluent areas.
Just to touch on that last point that you've made, Richard, in terms of the finance minister as well, and not to embroil you into political matters as well. We've obviously seen what's going on with the finance minister. We've got the EFF who's also calling for him to resign. You've just said we cannot have a finance minister who continues to cut budgets as well. Would you say as Popcru, you would be behind those calls for the resignation of the finance minister, or are you happy to see how he can improve in his role?
Well, for us, it's not about an individual. It's about the policies that the ministry implements. Because you can get rid of Mr. Godongwale now, and yet you still have a minister who takes over him implementing the same policies. So for us, it's not about the individual, but rather about revisiting the kinds of policies that we implement in the country. And we're against austerity. Whoever implements austerity measures is not would not necessarily find favor from us.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Of course, that was the Popcru spokesperson, Richard Mamabolo, just speaking to us about those missing 3 police officers.